Peace, peace. This your host, Selah Shalom, and this is the Cosmon Teachings in the Words of Jehovah and His Angel Ambassadors from the Cosmon Bible Owaspi. And the topic of discussion today is called Thought Elias Gabriel Declares Himself God, and the Origin and the Rise of Islam. Many Muslims believe that Islam is a religion that is chained to the Hebrew prophecy about the Comforter mentioned in the New Testaments being Muhammad. Many Muslims believe Yeshua was given signs of another prophet coming after him, which many Hebrew Israelites broke down and proved otherwise. But here I will reveal the truth of the matter, having nothing to do with the Comforter or a prophet that was to come after Yeshua. Here I will show the root cause of Islam being established. Thought Elias Gabriel, being the founder of Islam, is the same Thought Elias Gabriel that established Christianity on earth for the false Christ Luamong. It was after Gabriel established Christianity on earth for the false Christ Luamong that the problems began between Luamong and Gabriel, which results made Gabriel to establish his own heavenly kingdom and declare himself as God, and raise up a mortal ward as an earth representative of his doctrine. The same way the false Christ used Constantine, likewise did Gabriel use Muhammad to establish his doctrine on earth. Before any religious doctrine is established on earth by the false god, it is in full practice in heaven, among the angels. And the purpose of the false god establishing their doctrine on earth among mortals is to convince mortals into believing their religious doctrine of that god. So at the time of death, the spirit of that mortal will be a subject to that god who he or she confessed on earth. And this is how these false gods populate their heavenly kingdoms with the spirits of the dead. Now here on how Islam came about. God's Book of Esra, chapter 49, verse 1 through 31, it states, the origin of Mohammedism. Verse 1, and the Lord said, after Luamong had cast out all other false gods in his earth dominions, he set to work enriching his heavenly home, employing no less than 7,000 million angel slaves for that purpose. Verse 2, and the place and extent of his heavenly capital was from Hastos to Rome, and thence northward to the Aquarian Mountains. Verse 3, his palace was modeled after Enoxa at Eteshang, and of equal magnificence. Verse 4, his greatest warriors were now exalted as lords, generals, marshals, and so on, and he provided rites and ceremonies and tournaments, and all manner of heavenly diversities. Verse 5, but he made the rules of entrance to his palace so rigid that only his highest officers and visiting gods could gain access to him. Now here's the root cause of why Islam was established. Verse 6, now, for upward of 1,000 years, the angel warrior Gabriel, alias Thought, had been to Luamong, his most faithful sub-god. Verse 7, and Luamong, the false Christ, had promised Gabriel that when he overthrew Baal and cast him in hell, he would give to Gabriel a great heavenly kingdom with an earthly base. Verse 8, accordingly, Gabriel applied for Jerusalem, his station, and for the heavens thereunto, and for 1,000 million slaves. Verse 9, but Luamong postponed the matter from time to time for more than 600 years. So here you have the root cause of why Gabriel had a problem with the false Christ, because the false Christ promised Gabriel his own heavenly kingdom over Jerusalem with the million angel slaves. This was the agreement between the two, Gabriel and the false Christ Luamong. Now here's the message Gabriel sends to Luamong, the false Christ. Verse 10, Thought Elias Gabriel then sent his messengers to Luamong, to wit. Verse 11, by virtue of my own worth before the gods of heaven, I greet thee in peace and love. First, in remembrance of thy many promises to me, in which thou hast kept no part thereof faithfully. Verse 12, second, that thou art not Christ, which is all knowledge, but a usurper and pretender. Verse 13. Third, that I made thee what thou art, and by my own hand helped thee to cast out Baal and Ashtaroth, and all the Roman and Argosian gods, or Greek gods, of which matters it is known in these three great heavens. Thou did promise me for more than 700 years to give me a kingdom of 1,000 million subjects. So here you can see it was Gabriel doing all the dirty work for the false Christ Luamong, and this was known in the three heavenly kingdoms of the Trinity. So this is a problem Gabriel had with the false Christ Luamong for some time now, and now Gabriel is no longer holding his tongue. Verse 14, And fourth, since thou art falsely raised above all gods within these regions, thou hast affected to know not me, yeah, and in thy great heavenly recreation and tournaments and receptions, thou hast not commanded my presence, or in any way shown more remembrance of me than as if I were an Isaean, which is a newborn spirit. Verse 15. And fifth, thou did long promise me that, if thou should succeed in establishing a sub-kingdom on the earth, or in Haiti, near the earth, thou would hand the same over to me, to rank thee in all things. But thou hast greedily kept both kingdoms to thyself, making either place thy residence, according to the times and seasons most propitious to thy own glory and ease. Verse 16. And lastly, that thou sacrifices the liberty of thy subjects, making them thy laborers to embellish thy kingdom, and making them little better than slaves, and forever parting in the ceremonies given in thy applause. Verse 17. These things have I often desired to speak to thee about, but thou ever affectedst to be overran with other matters, so as to put me off from my opportunities. Whereupon I have prayed to the Holy Ghost for hundreds of years to have my suit just and honorable and holy. Verse 18. But I shall search no further. Hundreds of thy millions of highest grades who went down to the earth with me to fight thy battle, and who know the justness of my case, will, at a word from me, withdraw from thy kingdom, and join me in an enterprise of my own. Verse 19. I shall await patiently for thy reply. So here, this was the last reply to the false Christ Luamung before Gabriel established his own heavenly kingdom, declaring himself God. Verse 20. But Gabriel received no reply to his message, and so, in course of time, he called together 10,000 angel warriors, and they assembled in a place called Kala Hored, the place of 7 steps in Haiti. Gabriel spoke before them, saying, Now this place, Kala, is the name that Gabriel will call his heavenly kingdom. And here you have the name Allah. And here it mentions the 7 steps of Haiti, referring to the 7 heavenly mountains of the first heaven, mentioned in Owaspi. And you can find these 7 heavens mentioned in the Islamic doctrine. Verse 21. Here will I establish my kingdom on earth, and forever. I will show this false Christ what I can do. Mark ye the great power of a God who is to establish a good foothold on the earth. The natural increase will soon populate a heavenly kingdom. As I stated in the intro, the purpose of these angels is to win spirits into their heavenly kingdoms. So at the time of death, the spirit of that mortal will be a subject to that God who he or she confessed on earth. And this is well understood among the angels, while mortals scarcely understand this when first entering the spirit life after death. Now here's where Gabriel mentioned he will raise up a prophet, which in return will be Muhammad. Verse 22. I will raise me up a prophet and a seer of my own on the earth, and establish a new doctrine amongst mortals. Behold, I have a sword that will cut to pieces Luamung, the false Christ's kingdom on earth. For listen, in the old Egyptian libraries are books and tablets and manuscripts that will show the perversities of the Constantine Bible. So here Gabriel states he will expose the falsehood of the Constantine Bible with the Egyptians' records, showing where many stories were plagiarized, like Mary and Jesus, stemming from Aset and Heru, and the story of Joseph being the story of Imhotep. Verse 23. Now when I have established my prophets, I will cause mortal legions of Arabia to possess these libraries, and especially Alexandria. And I will raise up mortal scholars, who shall establish the truth of my prophet's doctrine, and the falsity of this false Christ doctrine. And I will thus overturn his earthly kingdom, and possess all these mortal regions myself to be mine forever. So here you can see how Gabriel plans to expose the false Christ Luamung. And these are the precursors to war between Christianity and Islam, beginning in heaven, and then coming to earth. Verse 24. After that manner, the angel, Gabriel, boasted, and he made the 10,000 his holy council, and from amongst them he appointed marshals, captains, generals, heralds, and officers in general. And they built a throne in heaven unto Gabriel, and called it the throne of Kala, Hored. And he went and sat thereon, and then crowned himself Gabriel, God of heaven and earth. So here you have Gabriel now declaring himself as God of heaven and earth. And this is the God of Islam, Gabriel, and the name of his throne is Kala. And here you find the name Allah, where the name Allah meaning the God in the Arabic and Hebrew. And the term God is a title, not a name. Every God has a name, such as God Baal, Goddess Ashtaroth, God Osiris. So when we say God, Allah, we must identify the name of that God, Allah. And this is what Islam has not deciphered. They try to say Allah is the creator. But the name Allah, the root of the word Allah, comes from the Hebrew Elah, God, and Elohim, gods. And Elohim being plural mean gods, referring to a council of angels, and Elah, or El, being singular, means God. So God, Elah, is the head chief of the Elohims, the council of angels. In the King James Bible in Genesis, it states the gods, Elohims, are in mortal form. So when we say Allah, we are referring to an angel with that title as God, Allah. So Islam doesn't give you a name, but a title. And here in Owaspi, it reveals that Gabriel is the God, Allah of Islam. Verse 25. And then he crowned 10 lords, to wit, Atinav, Lichang, Tudal, Ra'am, Hakaya, Wakuf, Yedemas, Stuban, Wolf, and Gusak. And Gabriel thereafter commenced the initiation of members to his kingdom, and there thus acceded to his heavenly place, upward of 500,000 angels every day. And this continued until Kala contained more than 800 million angel subjects. Verse 26. Of these, certain selections were made according to grade, who were appointed as officers over the rest, and immediately they were put to work, building heavenly mansions and constructing streets and roads, and all things required in an exalted heaven. And in the meantime, Gabriel's palace and throne were exalted and beautiful beyond description. So here it gives you a view of how the angels build up heavenly kingdoms for their false gods. Verse 27. Gabriel knew the power of rites and ceremonies, and he provided unto his heavenly kingdom accordingly, so that his people were kept in a constant state of excitement because of his wonderful inventions, so that millions and millions of them truly believed he was the veritable creator of heaven and earth, thus in form of an angel. So now you have angels in his kingdom that look upon him as the creator in the image of man. And also, these rites and ceremonies are the same you see being practiced on earth. All religious rites and ceremonies are after the manner of the heavenly kingdom among angels. Verse 28. Gabriel perceived this, and for those he provided places of trust and nearness to him, that his miraculous power might be the better strength with the unbelieving. Verse 29. Now, the time came when Gabriel's kingdom was sufficiently established, and he began to provide for his great scheme to establish himself with mortals, that their spirits after death might be brought to his kingdom. For such is the order of Jehovah's creation, that whosoever man worship while he is on earth, to that God will his spirit float after death, and without resistance become a dutiful slave, not knowing there be other gods in other heavens. And I explained this earlier. So for all the Christians, Muslims, Buddhists, Brahmins, your spirits will become subservient slave to these false gods after death. Those who serve true God of heaven and earth will be taught of the Creator in the higher heavens, Etheria, and on how to reach them through the grades. But the false gods will have you believe their heavenly kingdom is the only heavenly kingdom and there is no other place to rise. This is the difference between true God and the false gods. True God teaches forever ascending into the higher and purer realms, while the false God keep you bound in their kingdoms with no inspiration of elevation. Now here's where Gabriel scouts out a mortal representative to establish his doctrine on earth, which in return will be Muhammad. Verse 30. And Gabriel made Atinev, chief, Lord of Lords, to go down to the earth and find a mortal capable of the required inspiration. And he gave to Atinev to be his co-laborers, Yedamis, Stubborn, and Wolf, and with them at their call 300 million warrior angels. Verse 31. And with this host, Atinev departed for the earth, for Arabenia. And as he went forth, he dropped off his host at certain distances, groups of angels, which formed the line of light from Gabriel down to the earth. Now, God's book of Esther, chapter 50, verse 1 through 33, it states, verse 1, the Lord said, Gabriel raised upon the earth one Muhammad, and inspired him through his angel host. And the angels inspired Muhammad to go once every month in the year into the cave Hira, on which occasions Gabriel came in person and talked with Muhammad, who had Su'iz in great perfection. And Su'iz is a person who could hear and see spirits or angels. So here it states, just as historical records state, that Muhammad was inspired by Gabriel, and he dwelt in a cave where he communed with Gabriel. Verse 2, 12 years in peace did Gabriel inspire mortals through Muhammad. But at the end of the 13th year, Muhammad attained sufficient strength to draw the sword for Gabriel's doctrine. And Gabriel, through inspiration, caused the Mohammedans to commemorate this as the beginning of his kingdoms on earth. And they, therefore, consecrated the said period of time. And this is referring to the year 622 AD, when the Mohammedans made their Hajj, immigration, into Medina, and then began the Muslim calendar. And Medina was the Hebrew capital before Muhammad came on the scene. And it was these Hebrews that offered Muhammad and his followers refuge. Verse 3, and on this first meeting of the faithful in Gabriel, Muhammad, being under inspiration, spoke before the multitude, saying, verse 4, there is but one God, and he is God. Heaven is his, the earth is the Lord's, through the angel Gabriel. This is the sum and substance of all things. This was the doctrine of Abraham and Moses, our forefathers. Verse 5, but evil men have invented other gods, which have no existence. They are idols, which exist only in superstition and ignorance. Verse 6, revere me not, nor call me wise. I am not wise. I have little learning. Knowledge cometh to me from the unseen. My eyes are open, my ears are open. I see and hear spiritual things. The angels of heaven tell me things of wisdom. Verse 7, I do but repeat them. Therefore I am not wise, nor great. I strive to be honest and upright before God. But I am weaker than a child in these respects. Therefore worship not me, nor bow down before me. I am nothing. Verse 8, as I am an instrument in the hands of God through his angel Gabriel, so also were Abraham and Moses and many of the prophets. They could work miracles. I cannot. Therefore I am the least of God's prophets. Verse 9, that ye may become exalted before God, I am sent into the world. Shall I reveal what Gabriel hath told me? Or do you believe God is dead, or gone afar off? Believe ye that he cannot rise up a prophet in this day? Is God weak? Or hath he forgotten the world he created? Verse 10, why hath this thing come at this time? No man can answer that. Gabriel said, there is a false God in heaven, and he hath falsely called himself Christ. Gabriel said, that he himself, Gabriel, provided the way for the gathering of the lost sheep of Israel through an Aisu. Verse 11, brothers, I will tell you why I am chosen of God. It is to circumvent the Christians' adultery from coming into Arabia and the countries north and south and east. And this is one of the reasons Muhammad through Islam was preventing Christianity to spread into Arabia. Verse 12, these countries were given by God to our forefathers, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and thence down to Moses, and thence down to us. Verse 13, there is but one God, and Gabriel is his angel of all the worlds. Verse 14, and God raised up a prophet from time to time to bless his chosen people. Verse 15, he put this matter upon me. I know only to serve God. Verse 16, the Christians are merciless warriors. The false Christ and his worshippers are working for the Romans and not for salvation. Wherever they go, they destroy the libraries and all manner of learning. Verse 17, will ye submit like slaves to have them despoil you? Is there no Arabian blood in your veins? Verse 18, when asked to state the Muhammadan doctrine, he said, to tell no lies, to not commit fornication, to preserve the ceremonies, to give to the poor freely, to observe the sacred days, to aggress not, but to war for the innocent and oppressed, to maintain the liberty of the people, to steal not, and to deceive no man. Verse 19, Muhammad, being under the inspiration of God, Gabriel, and his angels, collected together thousands and tens of thousands of warriors, and went forth to conquer. And the angel host of Gabriel went forth with Muhammad's army, and inspired them to such degree that they were without fear or hesitation. And Gabriel's host of angels went into the armies that fought against Muhammad, and inspired them with fear and cowardice and panic. Verse 20, and it came to pass that wherever Muhammad went, there was sure victory, the like of which had not been for many centuries. So here you can see how the angel host of Gabriel was behind the victories of Muhammad and his followers, the same way the false Christ Luamung was behind Constantine. Verse 21, now Luamung, the false Christ, had previously destroyed for the most part the Alexandria library, having inspired a mortal priest, Cotilius, to do the work. Verse 22, and Luamung, the false Christ, now perceiving the triumphant of Muhammad, inspired 300 monks and priests to go throughout Hellas and Arabia and destroy the ancient state, records, and libraries. And they went hither and accomplished the destruction. So it said the false Christ perceived what Gabriel was doing, which was to expose him. Verse 23, Muhammad was shown this by Gabriel and used it as a battle cry for his soldiers. Verse 24, Luamung, the false Christ, now declared war in heaven against the false god Gabriel, and in not many years they both carried their wars down to earth, contending for certain localities on the earth. Verse 25, as for the other two false gods, Kabbalistes alias Buddha and Enoxa alias Brahma, they had been in war against each other for 600 years. So from the 1st century to the 6th century, which is 600 years, you had the wars between the Buddhists and the Brahmins going on in the land of India and China, while at the same time you had these wars going on between the false Christ and Gabriel in the lands of Arabia, Africa, and Europe. Verse 26, now had these four false gods possessions of the whole earth, at least wherever there were mortal kingdoms and emperors. And this is what you have today, the four religious heads of the beast: Islam, Christianity, Buddhism, and Brahmanism. All these religions encompass the earth with the sword to establish their doctrine. And with that, I'd like to say peace and blessings, and catch you on the next documentary called The Four Religious Heads of the Beast. Shalom.